Welcome to WebEx. Enter your access code or meeting number followed by pound.
647.
Enter your attendee ID number followed by pound. If you do not...
Hiring it. Oh, here we go.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
We were worried. I was on a Cisco phone, and for some reason it just decided to reboot. So I had to use somebody else's. I have no idea what happened.
All right. Well, let that be a lesson to you, colleagues. Aruba.
So, yeah, okay.
Just saying. I get a lot of crap about that, so this is my chance to hit back.
All right.
Absolutely.
Do you want to follow Michael, you want to repeat your question to John so you can answer the one?
Yeah, what was the last bit that you heard, John?
I can't remember the last question. It was about 802.11 standards or something about roaming, I think?
Yeah, I said under the 802.11 standards, which device in the overall system architecture makes the decision on whether and when to roam under what conditions?
Okay. I mean, technically, I guess the host does. Not sure if that was kind of a reference to 802.11, but you can change, aggressiveness on the system side to decide to make that decision quicker.
So if I had a host that was a little obstinate about its roaming, the so-called sticky client, what could I change in the WILC to encourage it to roam sooner?
So I mean, essentially the device's roaming aggressiveness, you can set that to a higher setting. Just kind of go into that, advanced tab and look at the, roaming aggressiveness. Just kind of navigate to the device manager under the control panel setting and do it that way. But Cisco also has an optimized roaming option that you could use if you have Cisco devices.
Okay, that's a great answer for Windows client devices. The question was, what could I change in the WILC, in the wireless LAN controller, to encourage roaming sooner?
Absolutely, yeah. So as far as that's concerned, like I said, Cisco has some advanced roaming options, but if you, as far as configuring the just optimizing that, just go to the within the GUI, you can go to wireless, go to the optimizing roaming through the advanced options, and then just enable the optimized roaming within that, and basically it checks for the RSSI. So if it falls below that threshold, then it makes that decision based upon that.
All
right, thank you. Kevin?
Yeah, John, can you tell me your experience about the type of environments you're supporting currently, some of the largest ones?
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as the environments I've supported, they've been fairly large environments. I've also worked in high density environments also. So I've supported fairly large environments with clients. So they've been thousands of APs, 200 to 500 branch offices. So having things like FlexConnect and local mode clients. And managing different, SSIDs and different authentication types, things like that.
So how large and how dense were some of those again?
So when talking about density, I was tasked with a design to, high density wireless solution for a collegiate environment. So it was an auditorium type of setting. So you have a lot of people, sitting close together and things like that. And the project was to provide the solution to them. We had to come up with a number of nominal throughputs that was typical for a user consuming those during those peak times. So anything from whatever they're streaming or listening to music or whatever have you, but just essentially and also accessing the file share and things like that. It's about 1 to 8 megabits per second for the casual surfing of them. And then so we were determining the channel plan, and we had to consider things like co-channel interference to do 2 different radios and that are broadcasting from that channel, and then finding the non-overlapping channels and configuring your access points, however, that you might within the 5 gigahertz range. And so it was relatively easy to implement using Cisco Prime. You can also determine the ability for each access point to receive that interface, and you can potentially utilize the 2.4 gigahertz channels, as they're a wider range and less attenuation. But there are only 3 channels that don't overlap, making it a problem when you have the high density environments with particular consideration to CCI. So, for example, if you calculated 300 megabits per second aggregate bandwidth used for 300 concurrent users, you're going to have to consider each cell, and then expect the throughput from that 802.11g and then 802.11a with being legacy have an average throughput of 25 megabits per second, with 802.11n HT20 with 1 spatial stream of in 25 megabits per second, and having that with 2 spatial streams with 70 megabits per second. So with the 2 spatial streams, it can hit up to 160 megabits per second. If you're using like legacy 802.11a APs, it's good to assume that you have an average of 20 megabits instead of 25 megabits per second for the sake of planning, meaning that you need 15 5 gigahertz channels to work with, 1 for each AP, totaling 300 megabits per second. And if you use the non-DFS 5 gigahertz channels, we'd use something like 36, 40, 44, 48, 149, 153, 157, so on and so forth, and just totaling up those 300 megabits per second. And then you will have to reuse 6 of those overlapping channels during the planning, just to ensure that you keep that CCI in mind. And now we have our we would have our channel plan in mind with that, as well as the average throughput being taken care of.
Okay, and a little bit more on the size. What size of the stadium, and like how many people and square feet would you say that you were going to support?
Yeah, it was an auditorium, so we shot for about 300 maximum users. Was the maximum users for that, devices, et cetera, things like that. I can't remember the exact square foot. I think it was like 6,500 square feet with that. And we could depending on there was a couple different auditoriums. One was 400 users and one was 300 users.
Okay. And then another question I have for you: can you describe a situation where you had to deal with a wireless issue on the network? What did you do to resolve it, and what role did you play in working with a group or by yourself to fix the issue?
Yeah, let me think of one that I could think about off the top of my head. When it comes to doing wireless troubleshooting, I typically look at Cisco Prime infrastructure and see, if the user's having issues as part of the AP that is having, low, dB signal level wise, and see if, what the heat map looks like. And then I'll look at the, drivers and firmware of the laptop to make sure that it's not desktop related. And then after that, I can look at, logs in Prime and logs on the WLC. I can also run, debug AAA and debug, MAC, whatever the MAC address is, to see, that the messages are coming up from there. But yeah, that's typically, the steps that you take. Just if it's a wireless issue, just looking at things like, first off, making sure that it is a wireless issue. If it's actually, an issue on the LAN or the WAN, following through on that and looking at how to remediate that. So whether it's, that be CPU throttling or, interface congestion. But if it is a wireless issue, just looking at things like making sure that the clients is associated to that to the network, and looking to see what type of clients it is and how they're connecting. Is it a legacy device that can only work on 802.11g instead of company-wide 802.11n or AC standards? So yeah, obviously there's a few different things you can look into. So it could be a hardware issue that's on the user's end, or things where they need a wireless card. If it's an issue with the access points, obviously you can look at things like the health of the access points, and you can also look at things like RRM to see if you're detecting rogue APs and other such sources of interference. But that's probably where I'd start.
Can you give me a specific issue that you worked on and what you did to resolve it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we ran into obviously some issues within that scenario that I was talking about. Just things like looking at there were some DFS issues that you can run into. So if obviously there's been times where I've had to be mindful of that. So if you're using DFS channels where you have them, turn off when they essentially detect that radar. If I've had situations where I've seen that, if that's part of your plan and you aren't aware of the DFS behavior, you're in for a surprise, obviously. And so that can sometimes be an issue, so you need to be aware of that. But yeah, you can run into, co-channel interference because, which I've seen before, because they're going to use the channels that are, available outside of the Uni 2 band. Uni 1 and Uni 3. But yeah, that can cause, general mayhem if you require 100% uptime. Obviously that's an issue. So that's something that you need to, look into and fix. And but yeah, just to get back to the channel plan and thinking, are we going to have the channels that are 100% up? And if so, obviously then we can focus on assigning channels statically, and essentially where they lie within the Uni 1 and Uni 3 bands. So I mean those are some considerations obviously that you have to look into, and whenever it's less relevant, allowing for those DFS channels to be used.
Okay.
Hey Jonathan, we lost about 7 or 8 minutes with the reboot. Do you mind staying over a little bit past our scheduled time?
Yeah, that's okay.
All right, just wanted to make sure because technically we're at our end time here, but I know some of the crew has some more questions, including myself.
Sure.
Let's see. I've got one that is definitely personally experience-based. Let's say you suspect high co-channel interference, but it's not really an option to, for logistical reasons. It's just not really an option to go to the site and run a quick mini survey or anything like that, right? But just some packet captures that you've done kind of look like there's some, an unusual number of things going on with TCP, et cetera. Specific to wireless, to 802.11, if you were able to grab a from the air packet capture, like through the WILSI, right, and then run it through Wireshark, what would be the number one thing you'd look for that would confirm a suspicion of co-channel interference?
I would say retransmission would be the number one thing that I would look at.
All right.
I'm sorry, you cut out there?
Yeah, I was just saying, great answer. Let's see. This is one that is relevant to our particular environment. So first generation RTLS setup, and as regards real-time location services, and specifically keep in mind first gen, that's about as many clues as I can give you. Under what conditions would you not use RRM?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, that's I'm just trying to think of scenarios where that. I would say RRM is looking out for rogue APs a lot, so that's part of the functionality, as well as coverage hole detection and things like that. But if I were just to say off of top of my head when you would not use it, as it involves RTLS, I'm not 100% sure on that. I have a feeling it involves detecting those devices as some sort of interference or something along those lines, but I can't say for certain exactly. I mean, the only reason I would really think is products that require things like clean air, so particularly like EDRRM, it's turned off, for location tracking, things like that, just because it kind of requires all channels to be hard coded and all power settings to be manual. In any Cisco or industry specialized practice like that is going to be ignored when using those products. So it's just another thing. RTLS tag only operates with that 802.11 BG. But I think you might also try to recommend the best channel widths to like 80 megahertz, which is a bad idea generally.
I agree. I think you were in the right neighborhood there, just to give you some feedback. And like I said, there's definitely no out to get you here. Let me see if I can give you a little bit more information and see if you can get closer. But you were in the right neighborhood. So RTLS, there's two essential flavors architecture-wise, right? There's Tell me what those two are as far as how does RTLS work and what are kind of the two major ways. And again, I'll help you along if you're not getting where I'm going from the question.
Yeah, I mean, it just RTLS essentially enables tracking for live client device location within the network. So
how does it do that?
Yeah, I mean, using the signal strength of each client device, it helps kind of locate the client devices that are either stationary or moving inside the intended area. Just kind of using that approach, just kind of determining that desired location through that. But there's, as far as I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Well, so we're kind of getting back to under what conditions would you not use RM, and we're exploring some kind of general how it works concept. So you said that listening for the signal strength of the client device would be it'd be one major flavor of how RTLS works. Right. So who's reporting the signal strength of the client? Who's giving us that information? Who's listening?
Yeah, absolutely. As far as all the reporting and things like that, I think that's the client that's giving that information, because they make the roaming decisions and what have you.
Okay. So I don't want to use up a whole lot of time here. So the APs are going to tell the WILSI, which is going to tell Prime, which is going to pass that to MSE or CMX. I hear this client MAC address at this RSSI, and based on that, we know that the APs are in these locations, and we have these obstacle values in the maps that we have in Prime. That means that it's probably right about here, and we've probably calibrated the model in MSE. Blah blah blah. Now, the final tie this off is what if we flip the script and the endpoint, the device, is reporting to some location engine that I can hear these BSS IDs at this received signal strength. What would you need to worry about under those conditions as far as using RM or not?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so reporting from their side, what would you need to... what they need to know. You obviously you want to make sure that they're not associating to bad APs that are acting like man in the middle or what have you, and so that's a big threat if they spoof the SSID in MAC of an AP. That's obviously a consideration. But with that said, I mean, is that kind of in the neighborhood of what you're looking at? I mean, there's variations in the client transmit power that kind of is resulting in those changes in detecting that RSSI.
Right. So again, you're right back in the same neighborhood, and I'm going to leave this off, but just so you don't go away scratching your head, Jonathan, if the client device is reporting to an RTLS engine, I can hear this AP's radio at this RSSI, I can hear that one over there, I can hear that one over there. But you're constantly varying the transmit power levels because of RRM.
Right.
What's going to happen to the calibration of your model inside the RTLS engine? It's going to get screwed up several times a day, week, whatever.
Adjusting the bandwidth because the locations to be incorrect within the RTLS system.
Well, right. You're messing with the primary metric the RTLS engine uses, right? The signal strength of the signal coming from the APs that the client can hear, right? Because remember, we're doing this opposite of MSE. The client saying, I hear these radios at this strength versus the radio saying, I hear this client at this strength.
Right.
Okay. Guys, you got anything else to close off with? I'm sorry I used up so much time.
No, I'm good.
I'm good as well.
All right. Well, Jonathan, thank you very much. Sorry about the inconvenient Cisco phone reboot, and we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. It's been a pleasure.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Jonathan.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.